intro. Luke Kirch, right?
Yes, Luke Kirch.
Okay, 3, 2, 1. And this is Anderson Francisco. Today I am with Luke Kirch. What a pleasure to be here talking to you at your own place here in Salt Lake City. Thank you for the invitation. And so we actually connected through Equicon, Nathan Bird's event. So a shout out for Nathan. Thank you for the event. It was amazing. But we're here to hear a little bit about you and the life experience that you have, the business experience that you have, and how you have helped some other companies to grow.
Okay. All right. Well, first of all, I've been in Utah for about 10 years.
Okay.
Moved here from Honolulu, Hawaii. And the context of moving here was I worked for a large aerospace company who had won a contract with Air Force that they needed basically a running start on the contract side. And over the past 10 years, we've grown a contract that originally was expected to peak at about 300 people. And we are now at close to 1,500 people.
Oh,
so
wow.
it's engineering services.
So you're still working with them?
I did until December.
Okay.
So I basically took I'd say a retirement action a year ago, and then I've spent the last year on a consulting basis to help transition in and train contract officers to continue the program and maintain stability. And that just wrapped up. So it turns out a contract that large, it's got a lot of implications. The program was to sustain the ICBM missile system. So it's a sustainment, keeping the missiles operational. And that's half of the program. And the other half of the program.
Is it nationwide or just in Hawaii, those missiles?
Well, no, this program here in Utah.
Oh, yeah.
No, it's the system is deployed in several different states. It's managed out of the Nuclear Weapons Center in New Mexico. The workforce here is located in Layton, in Clearfield at Hill Air Force Base. And then roughly about half of the program is to develop the next generation system, which is called Sentinel. So, but my experience and why we're here today is just kind of talking about, in effect, as it was growing this organization very, very quickly as new scope and new requirements were defined, right? So we were, let's see, the contract had a little bit of a running start. We were adding roughly about 200 positions a year.
Nationwide?
It was, majority of them were in Utah.
Nice.
There are some positions that were in California at Vandenberg Air Force Base, which is near Santa Barbara. We had a few positions in Louisiana. Let's see, a few. For a while there, we had a few in New Mexico, but the majority were here. We did have some remote support where people were supporting remotely. Let's say approved as remote workers and then periodically coming here physically.
And what was your direct role on all of this?
It was basically the face to the customer. So meaning that is basically getting proposals to them for changes and expansions, and then negotiating those, getting the scope and the positions and the funding on contract, and then managing the compliance with the contract terms. And because I had a long background with subcontracts elsewhere within this company, over years in Hawaii, I managed Navy contracts from contract sites, Navy and Army contracts, very large contracts also. I also got involved with helping to oversight and resolution of issues with any subcontractors. So roughly 30% of the contract was subcontract work.
Okay.
And of that, about 10% of the contract was small biz. And there's a bunch of criteria for small business, but we had a contractual requirement for at least 10% of our work is small business.
Okay.
And then roughly about 25-30% was subcontracted out, right? And then let's see. the small business component was high visibility, and I personally took a personal interest in making sure that let's say that the subcontractors had stability of funding, issues and concerns were addressed. Whether it was about protecting their IP or if there's some kind of payment issue or um, any issues with performance, giving them a chance to correct that through let's say corrective action, because we score all these contractors on the performance from the quality. So basically, working with the quality control manager, and every month, actually every quarter, they get rated, and if their ratings fell below a certain threshold, they kind of went on to a get well list, so to speak. So they would give an opportunity, like, your performance is not satisfactory or borderline, so you have an opportunity to fix, to get well, corrective actions they call it.
Okay.
And working with them, but the primary work was really working with the team and the director and all the various intermediate management to properly scope out new requirements that were emerging, and then getting that into a form of a proposal. The government sent in our request for proposal for the new scope, the new work requirements, and then responding to that with basically a financial proposal, and then anything unique to it, like if we were taking exceptions to a requirement, or we thought it was lacking in some specific area, like quality or something else, and then the timeline, because sometimes we got involved in facility expansion, which is a little bit along the lines of your background.
Yeah.
We're actually modifying several floors and buildings at Hill Air Force Base. And in this case, we had contract changes that led to more classified work, a lot of classified work. So basically, I was kind of part of the team that was, let's say, right in the middle of all that, on working with the owner of the building, because it was a unique arrangement where it was a commercially leased building that happened to be on base, so it's a little bit of a unique within the Air Force. It wasn't really a government building. So to do these facility expansions, they were big budget, $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, tight deadlines. And to do something like that, a lot of things have to happen with a lot of different groups. So
many things.
Many things.
I'm a home builder. I do residential, and I know all the moving parts involved in one home. I can only imagine something that has the government involved, massive square footage of
a lot of square footage,
expenses.
several floors, a lot of let's say dispersed responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And typically, these facility expansions have a lead on our side, the contractor side, and a lead on the government side. And in some cases, the requirements weren't really well defined at the start, but yet, things moved slowly, let's say on the outset, just trying to get everybody committed. But sometimes the government was still holding the deadline date firm.
Yeah.
So time is marching on, and you start out saying, okay, we've got a year to do this. And then pretty soon you're going, no, we just spent 3 months not getting very far on the planning and the funding and the requirement maturation. So now we have 9 months.
Yeah.
And then the money is coming in later than it was promised. So then you have to come up with contractual ways to proceed at risk, what we call is proceed at risk, where the company basically gets engaged with subcontractors to start the work or to engineer it, right? The architectural engineering part of it, or the utilities, infrastructure, and things, and going at risk, meaning out of company funding up to a certain limit until the point when the government finally releases the funds. So that's where contracts comes in, because I'm right in the middle of all that. I have to basically secure the approvals to do that. I propose a risk limitation, a ceiling that I think is reasonable, and on how much time we need to cover until the expected funding date so that everything stays on schedule and we meet the operational target date, right? So it's a little bit of a dance. It's high pressure. There's a lot of tension.
Yeah, it almost sounds like you're a lawyer because you're
Technically,
defining a whole lot of terms in this contract, right?
yeah. In fact, that's a good analogy because the contract function within the company, it is part of the legal department.
It is
right?
part of the department.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, the senior leadership chain went up to the head legal counsel, who's located in Washington D.C., who sometimes got involved when there was a dispute with the government, potential dispute, or something where a lot was riding on everything kind of happening in a very contracted time frame.
Yeah.
And basically, and then ultimately, depending on, let's say, the size of the proposal, the amount of negotiation, the vice president of contracts, which reported up to the top legal function, might get involved if there's something unusual about contract terms, right? Like where there might be an unusual amount of risk, or there might be certain certifications, that have a lot of implications, what's called certified cost and pricing, and all the things. Let's see, how would I put it? So the contract had these high growth years where lots happening because this constant. Let's see, we're hiring a lot of people. We're having the problems that come with that, which means you have to have when you hire a lot of people, you have to have well defined functions and tasks and job descriptions. Number one, you have to have
because those are W-2s. They're not independent contractors, right? Or both?
No, they're not independent contractors. You're for the most part you're hiring people in as employees.
Okay.
Right.
And you yourself at this position, you're acting as an employee as well.
Correct. Right.
Okay. So and what is your title on this? And which company is it? A private company?
They're a private company. It was called BAE Systems.
Okay, and BAE System is the company that BAE is the company that brought you from Hawaii.
Correct. Yeah.
So you used to work for them in Hawaii.
I worked for them in Hawaii on a number of large contracts. Initially, there were Navy contracts.
Nice.
Where we were basically doing rapid prototyping of what's called hyperspectral imaging or sensing. The application was a little unique because these sensors would be attached to pods underneath the aircraft, fly at high altitudes, and basically, let's see, how would I put it? They would basically interpret spectral content in order to detect something under the water.
Nice.
And that target could be, the target of interest was submarines. So, but it could just as well be something else. It could just as well be a whale. In fact, we had a contract at one point with NOAA looking at actually using early versions of machine learning, trying to predict where whales would be so that when they did testing, when the Navy did testing in the Pacific, that they didn't interfere with whale health, because when they do sound testing,
their sensory.
Yeah, they move by echolocation, which means they can be killed. There's certain number of that killed. So our contract literally was to model using what's now called artificial intelligence. Back then it was called machine learning, to model where the whales were likely to be based on a lot of information. And that contract was a little unusual because it was with National Oceanographic and Space Administration, or NOAA, National Oceanographic Air, like NOAA. Oh, I can't remember what that means. That's really bad. But NOAA, which is the folks that deal with the oceans. And we brought in a contractor because they're an expert in whale behavior and their habitats and what they feed. And it turned out to be the University of Scotland in Glasgow.
Wow.
So they were considered to be the worldwide expert on the behavior of whales all over the world. So we brought them
to do a major operation and improvement with the Navy.
Correct, with the Navy, yeah.
Yeah,
because
you ended up even needing to hire someone like an independent contractor who was an expert in whales.
Correct. Yeah.
That's cool.
And the Navy's concern was that the federal courts based on the West Coast were threatening to shut down all of their sonar testing in the Pacific because of the number of whales that were injured, basically, by the testing programs that were being done, right?
Okay.
And so the contest was there between environmental laws to protect species and defense priorities, which is you have to make sure that your sonar systems to detect bad people in the Pacific, you have to test them and you use them, follow movements and all this stuff. So you have two very competing high priorities, and it's all very much high stakes.
Yeah.
And this is the legal part of this was being played out of the federal court in San Francisco, but the Navy basically hired us to develop, or not the Navy, but this case was NOAA that got involved, but it was serving Navy interest because Navy was actually involved, and we hired various experts. In fact, we hired experts in the legal aspects of this, so as well as the behavioral aspects, and then that was a foray into machine learning, just to model what the behavior will be because there's so many variables, and we had some really smart people working on it because our function there is in downtown Honolulu, but we literally had 10 or 15% of the workforce was PhDs. We had a lot of smart people.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so most of our audience, they are small business owners.
Yeah.
And from our conversation, it's obvious that you're not running a small company.
No,
it's your own company, right?
Yeah, I am
but
not.
You have grown.
Right. And I've actually, I guess my experience with small business is I've worked for several startup companies over my close to 40-year career.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've kind of, let's say, helped them succeed over time. And and they were different places. And in some cases I helped them succeed to a point where I transitioned to another organization, but they're both small businesses and also a nonprofit. So, and I guess at an early age, I was kind of see where things fail and startups, right? Because my first real small business was actually at age 19. It was a tech company located in San Diego. It was small, about 150 people, and it was research and development. They're doing basically doing engineering design of a power device, basically, and they hired me to help do the engineering design. So I was reporting to making, but fairly small company, right? My department, basically, mechanical engineering, had about 4 or 5 people. That's it.
Yeah,
right?
that's still impressive.
Yeah, and they had a lot of, so they had a lot of high powered people because at that age they'd hired people from all over the country who wanted to live in Hawaii. I'm sorry, wanted to live in San Diego. But I kind of saw, the company was in the process of going public when they hired me. I was hired as an intern part-time. And then at the last minute, one of the banks pulled out.
Oh, wow.
And so the company was suddenly in crisis because it kind of went where I was finishing up my degree, and they said, okay, I had another month to go. They said, okay, as soon as you finish the degree, you're going to go from part-time intern to full-time, right? And that was like in March.
Mm-hmm.
And then in May, they said, well, we're letting all you interns go because this big action is now not going to happen, this IPO. And there's actually one period where we were scrambling to try to get revenue due to what we thought at the time was going to be delayed, right? So, for example, this company had a materials testing lab because they were trying to develop new alloys in Del Mar, which is a little surf town. And suddenly we're doing all these small projects for all these customers. Like we were actually going out trying to find a bunch of customers to use our testing lab to keep everybody paid. It was a mad scramble because it's basically a cash flow crisis now, right?
Yeah.
And we only had 4 or 5 people in the test lab, but we were actually just about covering our bills because we went out, we had some unique testing equipment, and that part of the company, it's easy for us to go out and find customers because not too many people had the type of materials testing.
Yeah.
Heat treating and hardening and all this kind of stuff. But I guess what I kind of saw at an early age, I saw a number of things. Lessons were that there's a lot of risk when you're trying to take a company out of, let's say private capital, because at that point they had venture capital to exit, right? And no matter how much capability and expertise you think you have, it can still fail. And this company literally had a lot of expertise. They literally had hired top people in this field from several countries: Israel, Russia, Japan, throughout the U.S. It was a nuclear energy device called a tokamak. And they had literally scoured the world and brought some of the top scientists from all over the world to work in this little place in Torrey Pines.
Well, that's impressive.
Yeah, and it still failed, right? I mean, that's what that was kind of interesting. And the other lesson that I kind of learned at that startup stage was that that leaders within a company, if they're not willing to kind of step up and make their opinions known within the higher leadership of the company, then they may, decisions may go in a way that they would rather they not. But if they're silent, then they're culpable, I guess, because what I watched is that the person I reported to, he was PhD out of Cornell, but he was introverted, and behind closed doors, he had a lot of opinions about things that the company was doing wrong, just on the lip of it failing. But I never once saw him speak up in the corporate board meetings or let's say the decision meetings.
Yeah, that's sad.
And that made a big impression on me, because I thought, if you oppose or you have issues or concerns or you see risk in the way the company is going, then you almost have a responsibility to step forward and present those, at least as points of information to leadership, right? And I must have taken that lesson to heart, because when I was in Ohio, I was working for another startup company that was in engineering services based out of Texas, and they hired me in at an office in San Diego, and they brought me out to Cleveland. And I guess I guess I must have taken that lesson to heart, because I was in a company that this company was several hundred people, and they're doing engineering services across a NASA center with 3,000 people, right? So involved in a lot of programs, launch programs, rocket programs, eventually space station programs. But I remember I kind of went in when I was there of taking the attitude of to help this company stay healthy. Even as a young engineer, I was 22 years old, 23.
You graduated in engineering, right?
Yeah, yeah. But I always thought that even though I'm not in a leadership position, at least I started out as just an engineer, that I still had responsibility to raise concerns and issues to leadership, even if it made them uncomfortable, and knowing that I was just simply giving them my input based on my expertise. Okay, so I in other words, I went to a very good school. I have a master's degree in engineering sciences. And a few years of experience. And I let's see how I put it. I would defer to them, as they're the one. It's their role to make the final decision. But even as a junior engineer, it's still my responsibility to give my honest technical expertise, even if I know that they don't want to hear it or it makes them uncomfortable, or that they have to trade it off with other things. I just felt it was an obligation, to tell you the truth. So in other words, it wasn't like, well, it's going to create some discomfort, so I'll just say nothing.
Yeah.
And I'll just give you one example. Because honestly, I think growing a company means, at the core of it, is that you hire good people that you can trust. You put an imperative on performance and your customer satisfaction. That and there's a lot of secondary things tied to that. And that you have a sense of integrity in everything you do, internally and externally, meaning that when there are problems, internally and externally, you simply say, we have something that needs to be resolved. Like, we don't hide it. We don't pretend away. We don't point the finger and say, well, that's not my job. That's that person. Or that's not my shortcoming or whatever. That's, point the finger. None of that. Because ultimately, it's understanding internally that, look, we all succeed together or we all fail together, right? It's not, I'm going to succeed, so I'm going to look good. I'm going to get credit. No. It's when you're succeeding because you're paying attention. Everybody is on the same ethical performance page. Everybody gets credit, right?
Yeah, we call it when people are owning it.
That's right. And you never say, well, I'm the guy whose name is on this or that. Everybody gets credit. And even if somebody is a little introverted and they feel uncomfortable, well, I don't want to stand in front of everybody. Then figure out some way to convince them to be up there anyway. Tell them, it doesn't really matter, but just make sure that the credit is going all around, because nobody succeeds on their own. That's really the truth. There's no heroes. Sometimes companies pretend, well, this guy's a genius or this guy's a genius. No. It's the guy that cuts the metal. The guy that's pushing through the financial reporting to make sure that it's accurate. It's the person that makes sure your travel reports are supported. It's a person that is coming through requirements and saying, we're not meeting this requirement. Not, well, we don't want to hear that. Why don't you get out of the room? It's, no, why don't you come in and talk about what you're having a headache with, right? And let's figure it out. Or somebody, there's so many examples. So, because sometimes organizations don't communicate well. And sometimes people, if somebody raises that concern, like, well, I wasn't kept loop in this, that the human thing to do sometimes is to personalize and say, well, that person is an outlier because they're always complaining about something or something like that. It's always to attribute it to like that person's a problem. But the more mature organization says, no, that person's just a messenger, right? Because we had a guy up here that, let's say, was he just been hired to manage subcontractors. He's a little bit condescending to the program office. We had about 800 people. Everybody wanted him out of the door within a month. I mean, everybody. They all like, he's condescending. He puts everybody down. This and that. But he actually did his job pretty well. But his attitude was, I'm a lot smarter than you.
He didn't build people up.
Yeah. Exactly. And I said, it's okay. There's a whole spectrum of intelligence out there, different kinds of intelligence, right? But having this attitude of well, I'm this or that because you don't know everything I know, that's all nonsense. But even so my job actually was to say, you know what, he does his job well. He's got a lot of experience. It took me months to find somebody, and my hire is going to take for another 4 months, and we can't stand to have 4 months vacancy. So he's going to require some coaching on the behavioral aspects. I say, and my attitude as a supervisor was, well, that's not his problem. That's our problem. It's his problem and my problem, because that's my job as a supervisor to coach him on these are the behaviors that people are finding offensive. Even if you're not aware of them, it doesn't really matter. Okay, the people you're offending, they're younger, great. They're in their 30s, and he's probably in his 50s. Okay, great. You got a lot of time on them. It doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter what the truth is, because it's just how they're interpreting it, right?
Yeah.
So the behaviors will change. And then at one point, part of the thing that he identified was he wasn't being kept in the loop, because we used to have like an interdepartment finance contract, subcontracts weekly meeting that we stopped doing a year before when we had personnel rotation. So when he identified that as one of the problems, or one of his complaints, and actually it is a complaint of everybody, because he was doing things open loop, and he basically said, I have no opportunity to share my concerns with other people. And I thought about that going, you know what, he's right. We don't really communicate across departments. We used to. So I said, regardless of whether or not I can manage to keep him in the job or not, he's identifying a flaw in the organization on how we communicate. So first of all, we're going to restart those interdepartment, we call them cross-functional meetings, right? So you got a finance department of 15 people, you got a contract department of several people, you got a subcontract department, and we're all going to be in the same room once a week, and we're just going to go through what everybody's doing and making sure everybody's working in sync and everybody has information that they need in order to do their job well, right? So it's all tied to performing. But sometimes when performance fails for an individual, it's recognizing that maybe that the problem is not necessarily just the individual. It could simply be a process or some way the organization is working, and focus on that, right? And then and if there is a behavioral aspect, then being upfront, like with this person, I just literally said, we're going to sit down. He said, we're going to have a corrective plan. We'll work out with behaviors that need to change your perceptions, so that you work well with the larger group. Because I said, we're all going to fail together. We're all going to succeed together. And my goal is, succeed together. And I said, I was honest with him. I said, there's only one person between you and the street right now. It's me, because I'm being told to fire you by the director dude. But it's my ultimate call. And I said, I'm not going to do that. I said, it's just me. I had one guy, I directed on Monday by the director dude. He's going on trial. He says, when I get back on Friday, I want this guy here. Well, he was. He said, why is he here? I said, well, because I'm going to do a corrective program plan with him. We're going to work on this together. Because that function is critical to our overall success, because 30% of everything we do is through a subcontract. That means it's really critical, right? We can't have a gap of 4 months, not when you're hiring 200 new people. 200. At the time, I don't know, we're running 150.
Before we jump into a new story, because you were connecting several ones.
Yeah.
But I noticed I made your point, and I actually have to go on a little bit.
Okay.
But I've heard a lot of things, all great things. And you said, you started by saying that you're retired, pretty much.
Yeah.
And then we went back to your first job.
Yeah.
And throughout all those 40 years, this is the main message that I got. You saw the big problems of when people don't own up to the company,
right,
in their different capacities. And you've learned it and you've applied it. And throughout the years, in different states, you've been able to build people up within organizations.
Exactly.
So they can work as one.
Exactly.
And that is what small business owners and other corporations can get the help that they need to from Luke, because you have lived 3 years the experience of building an organization by having several people working together. And perhaps the coolest one, even coaching people who were not ready at that point.
Yeah.
And you help them to mature in.
Yeah, it's ultimately, I mean, it's respecting the multi-talents that a lot of range of talents that help an organization succeed, and respecting what they contribute. It's almost, sometimes I personally get the feeling that corporate cultures, people are like human resource units, or I don't know what's the parlance that they use, talent sets. It all sounds like little things that you go buy at Walmart.
Yeah.
And I just don't understand that, because I thought, no, they're people. They come with a whole range of experiences. They come with things that they can do. They come with ability or inability to foster healthy relationships or know how to manage conflict, because conflict is natural, in my opinion. It's how you respond to conflict that takes things down or up. And ultimately that you value what people contribute, and you make sure that they know it. So I always, I'm almost every single day in my work life, I send out thank you notes first thing in the morning, emails on whoever
that means a lot.
Provided something the day before. I don't think very many other people did it, but I just started the morning going, who should I be thanking this morning, before I jump into everything? Who kind of responded to a request, in a timely manner? Who kind of raised an issue that I didn't know about? Who kind of stayed a few extra hours because we had a deadline to get a proposal in? I mean, just extraordinary things. I mean, I've had people willing to stay up all night one time. We had a $800 million contract mod to make. We got the draft from the customers, to put it politely, imperfect, very imperfect. And he offers to stay up the whole night. It's 10 o'clock at night, and he's listening to me swear a lot, because the mod was about 200-300 pages thick, and none of the numbers agreed to what was negotiated. And so his comment was, I've never or maybe it's my wife. She says, "I never heard you swear so much." And this guy, we're up there, up in Clearfield, and he says, "Should we just stay up the whole night to work on it?" And I said, "It's already been a 15-hour day. You know what? We should both get sleep, and first thing in the morning, our deadline is the end of close the business the following day, which meant midnight. And if we didn't meet the deadline of having everything corrected, negotiated, and signed, then we're going to furlough 900 people the following day. It's already set. So bad things will happen." I said, but we won't resolve that because we're on an hour sleep. We need to go to sleep, so we're going to sleep, right? And then I couldn't get to sleep at 3 a.m, so I just started working on it, and we got it done. But it's actually just realizing that the people are willing to go a little bit beyond their defined. Well, I put in my 8 hours. I mean, this guy's like, I'll stay up all night if you want. I said,
That's awesome.
Who does that? So that's fundamental, I guess. It's just, it's just respecting people. They're not units of measure. They're not quote unquote skill sets, because those are amorphous and they change with time. People acquire skills, they forget skills. I didn't mention it before, but I helped grow a nonprofit organization in Hawaii for 2 years, and I grew it to roughly from about 30 members to about 500 members in 2 years.
Wow!
And we grew it very fast. But it was the same philosophy that helped that organization grow.
Building people up.
Yeah, building people up, relationships. Because in that case, because nonprofit, a lot of our we were heavily dependent on partnerships with all these other organizations. We had a lot of partnerships going, right? Because technically we only had 2 employees. It was just me and my boss, and she dealt with the media because everything we were doing was very visible. We're working trying to change state laws, and meanwhile we're trying to build a professional association of people in startup technology companies, right? So, but the reason other organizations wanted to come into our circle of partnership is, number one, we enunciated what our goal and mission was, right? And then we brought them in to make sure, as they partner with us, make sure that they're getting credit as part of this partnership. In other words, we weren't going out there and saying, this whole thing was Hawaii Technology Trade Association. It was always, no, it's these are this group of organizations that are presenting this, and we're all going to get some credit for this. We're all going to contribute. So in other words, it wasn't like we want our name blast all over the place, but we're not going to help. No. You have to have some resources. You have to help promote it. Kind of like what Nate's doing with his organization. Yeah. He has a lot of partners. You have to help promote it. You have to help get the word out. We're going to ask you to commit in some area to maybe help out, depending on what it is. What we're doing is important. We're dealing with the who's who in Hawaii of tech startups. But it's valuing each organization and person and leader that helps contribute to the overall goal, right? Which is, so it's the same principles, and it just happened to be a different type of organization, right? Nonprofit. But people that weren't close to our organization, we had so many things going on, because in effect is we leveraged, and we had basically a force multiplier in effect, right? Yeah. We had 2 employees doing a lot of things, and we had things that were going on all over the state, never been done before. We had a lot of stories in the pub, Hawaii, the Pacific Business News, and one organization came to us and they said, "Well, how many people do you have employees do you have in your organization? 20, 25?" I was embarrassed to say, "No, we have 2." And they're like, "Really? You got like these conferences with hundreds of people 1 week, and then you got some seminars going on in the other islands, and then suddenly you got this big thing and big event that you did in Kapolei that's written up in the front page of the paper." And they're just like, "You only have 2 people doing that?" I said, "Yeah, and we have a lot of partners. We are leveraging all over the place. We're working with the university. We're working with economic development organizations. We're working with chambers of commerce, as you're part of that.
Part of the
we bring them into it. We bring in umpteen different organizations. We bring in so many different organizations, and that's how we succeeded. And then every step was making sure that we're respecting the, let's say, the interest of those partners, right? In other words, if they're upset at something or some concern, you always make sure that they're getting credit. So you're standing in front of an event that's got hundreds of people. You say, you invite the sponsors to come up here and talk a little bit about what you do, what your business does, right? And you got a few minutes, and your banner's up there. They're getting a little visibility, and then back then I was working with a lot of startups. So sometimes
I'm gonna have to wrap it up over here.
Okay, but anyway, I'm just saying that there's corollaries with different types of organizations, whether or not it's a
organizations and people,
government, or a nonprofit. The same principles apply to growing an organization. That's basically it. That's really the point. So
that's awesome. No, we got amazing content, and thank you for the time.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And I can tell. I mean, we spent almost an hour here. That's pure raw content. I won't even edit this one because, Luke, you're very passionate. That shows. Congrats on what you have accomplished, and it's an honor for me to connect with you. I've got a lot to learn.
All right. Thank you very much for the time and the opportunity to share a philosophy.
No problem.
Thank you.
Okay, that was good.